IELTS Listening, version 56658. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Part 1. You will hear a teenager asking about joining a film club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi, can I help you?
Yeah, I saw on the internet that you have a film club here at the cinema, but there wasn't a lot about it. Can you tell me a bit more?
Yes, we're still setting up the web page. Sorry about that. We only started the club a few months ago. It's been very popular right from the beginning. We have regular film showings and there are lots of other benefits.
How often does the club meet?
Every 2 weeks, on Thursday nights.
OK. And I'm 16, so could I join?
Sure. People of any age can join.
Right. So how much does it cost to join?
Well, it depends. The basic charge is £24 a season, but for people eligible for concessions, it's £21.50.
I'm a student.
You'd get the concession rate then.
That's good.
That entitles you to free entry to the club films and also to £2 off tickets for all other films on at the cinema. So you'd pay £4.50 instead of £6.50.
Great. OK.
Now, I don't know if this applies to you, but club members are also eligible for 3 hours complimentary parking when there's a film on.
Well, I don't drive, but my girlfriend does, so it might be useful, yes. OK, well, I'd definitely like to join.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Can you give me any information about the next few films you're showing?
I'm afraid we've run out of leaflets for this season, so I'll tell you about the next few films and hopefully we'll have all the details on the internet soon. So the next meeting's this Thursday, October the 14th, and that's a film called Pablo.
I read the reviews of that. It's set in Argentina, isn't it? About a child who's run away from home?
That's right. It just came out recently.
And the kid somehow gets on TV and he wins a dance competition or something.
A singing competition, yeah. I haven't seen it either, but it tells you on the posters. Yes, it sounds really good.
Well, I definitely want to see that. What's on after that?
On October the 28th, there's an American film called The Soldier. That's an old silent movie. But in this showing, we have someone who'll accompany it on the piano, just like they used to in the old cinemas, though it was sometimes an organ accompaniment in those days.
It must be a pretty old film then. When did they release the first talkies? 1926 or 27?
Yes, well, this was made in 1922, so well before. Though I think they had short feature films with sound by 1923, actually.
So what sort of film is it?
Well, it's billed as a comedy, though you'd think it was a war film from the title. I don't know much about the plot. We don't have much information, though you could always look it up on the internet.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Then the next film after that, so that'll be, let's see, the 11th of November, is a film about animals. And it's just called Tiger. And that's a cartoon film, which makes it sound as if it's for children, but actually it's aimed at adults, and it's really quite frightening in places. I saw it when it first came out.
What's it about?
It's got no humans in it at all. It's just about the effect of environmental changes millions of years ago on the animals who lived then. It's a really strange film. There's a talk afterwards given by the director, so that should be very popular. You'll need to book early for that, I should think.
Right. Well, thanks for all that. Now, if you can give me the application form...
Sure.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear a radio program in which a man called Stephen talks about an organization called extrahands.com. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Stephen Jennings has been involved with an intriguing organization called extrahands.com. I'll let him explain.
Thanks. Yes, extrahands.com was started 15 years ago by two New Zealanders who'd bought an old farm building and some land. They wanted to go organic, but they realized they'd need help clearing the fields for cultivation, and they just didn't have the money to pay for it. But they knew lots of people wanted to visit New Zealand. So they set up a website and advertised for volunteers to come and help on the farm there. Anyway, they got lots of volunteers, and they got their farm going, and extrahands.com was born. Today, the organization matches people who need help with people who are willing to work as a way of seeing the world. You can either be a host if you need assistance, or a volunteer if you're offering to work. In either case, to become a member, you just fill out a form on the extrahands.com website and pay the $25 subscription. You only have to do that once. But for your membership to stay active, every 12 months you have to go back to the website and check the details on your form there, adding information about any help you requested or work you did over that period. So how does it work? Well, if a host has some work that needs to be done, he or she goes to the extrahands.com website and posts a description of the work. So the way most volunteers access these details on the website is by specifying the country or region they're interested in working in, but a few search according to how long they want to work for. Not many people have strong feelings about what sort of work they want to do. They're mostly fairly open about it. If you're interested in volunteering for a particular job, you can email your host to arrange the dates and establish things like accommodation and hours of work. It's all fairly informal. There are no legal documents or anything like that. But you do both need to have some sort of written record of what's been agreed before you actually arrive. What about problems? Well, there are too many members for the organization to be able to investigate them all. But there's an online message board where members can post details of any difficulties they've had, things like unsatisfactory accommodation or volunteers who haven't done the work agreed, and this works very well.
Before you hear the rest of the program, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
I know you've personally had lots of extrahands.com placements, Stephen. Tell us about them.
Well, my first placement was in Portugal, where I helped a local guy with a guidebook he'd written in English. I read what he'd written and corrected the English and made some suggestions for improving it. I was very pleased with it when I finished, and I learned lots about the country. The next placement was on the other side of the world, in Australia. I was on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and since I'm pretty good in the kitchen, they had me fixing meals for 30 sheep shearers. I stayed 2 months, and it was a lot of fun, but I can tell you I was glad to get back home to California and just lie on a beach and relax. Okay, then, after a well-deserved rest, I did a job in South Korea for a small company that wanted an English speaker to show visiting Americans around. They gave me some books to read, and I learned as I worked. I loved it, and I developed a real taste for Korean food. My most difficult job was for an older lady in the USA. She had a gigantic house and grounds, but she couldn't maintain them all herself. So I worked for her, digging and planting flowers and stuff around her swimming pool. And she grew tons of vegetables, too. She was nice, but she fed me hot dogs morning, noon, and night. Now, my most recent placement was last summer in Italy. I helped a family add a room onto their house. I didn't speak Italian or know the first thing about building, but the husband had an English-Italian phrase book, and together with sign language showed me exactly what to do. And the wife's cooking was out of this world.
Thanks, Stephen. And if you want more information about...
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2. Part 3. You will hear part of a discussion between two drama students called Charles and Lorna about a songwriting course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Charles. I'm writing my report on the songwriting course for drama students. You know, the 1-week residential course for drama students from different universities where you learn about writing songs. You did that course last year, didn't you? Could you give me some tips for the report? I'm having a few problems with it.
Yes, it was great. Well, Lorna, you could start by thinking about what you got out of it.
Evaluating how useful it was is simple. The challenge is not to go over length.
Referring to published sources might help. That would make it more scholarly too.
OK, I'll go with that.
And saying why you did the songwriting course is important. Some people just do it as another string to their bow to help with auditions for work and things. I thought it was a good opportunity to try out new techniques for communicating feelings and emotions. I was already confident about singing before I did it.
I thought it was the location of the course which made it special, being held in a country house rather than in a university. They were doing some building work on part of the house, though, so it wasn't always easy to concentrate.
I enjoyed the workshop most. How about you?
Well, we were divided into 6 small groups for the afternoon, each with their own advisor. That was the best bit for me, having that discussion with an expert. When we got into pairs to start writing our songs, the idea was to combine people with different levels of knowledge and experience. But my partner preferred working on her own generally.
And what did you think of the course content? I hadn't realised before how important the structure of a song is to its success.
Yes, we learned it's no use writing the most beautiful words and melodies if there's no shape. And we learned about the importance of a chorus in a song.
I knew about that stuff from my singing classes. It's a bit obvious, isn't it?
I suppose so. It was the input on lyrical styles and forms that I found tedious. You could always look them up on the web.
Anyway, how did you get on with writing your song?
It was tough, and Peggy, my partner, was hard work, which wasn't funny, and writing was a slow process as a result of our lack of communication. By the time we finished, I was exhausted.
Writing music from the heart is like that, especially by the end of a course.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Well, that's got the report sorted, thanks. Have you decided which teachers' workshops you're going to do next term?
I want to do Bob Lacey's. He's got a brilliant reputation for voice coaching. You know, getting us to use dialects and different pronunciation and stuff. He gets you to do things like read out a newspaper article in character. It's amazing.
I'm thinking of going to Evelyn Chance's workshop.
Oh, Evelyn. She's quite a character. Is she running the stage fights course again?
Yes, fencing and pretend punches and throwing techniques. She really knows how to help actors use the whole of the space available.
Lots of people like Ted Winter's workshop.
He knows how to deliver. He's keen on actors conveying emotion through their bodies and faces alone. It's a great way to reveal complex relationships and situations to an audience without making a speech of any kind. I'm definitely going to sign up for that one.
If you want to understand a director's ideas, Kevin Gray's workshop would be perfect for you. He likes telling people what to do, and he's always saying you can't have a company of actors reading a play any way they want because they'd end up fighting amongst themselves. They must listen to the director.
What about Dorothy Thomas? She's good at activities for getting rid of stress and, emptying your mind of all thoughts about the past, and that can really help when acting.
Well, I think I'll put my name down for...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Part 4. You will hear part of a talk about recent research into the design of workplaces. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello everyone. I recently completed some important research into the way office space is designed and its impact on employees. The open plan office had been the norm for offices around the world. I'm sure you can picture one. A big room with maybe 50 or 100 workers sitting at their workstations. You might think open plan designs are a recent phenomenon, but they actually came about in the early 20th century when businesses needed large numbers of people to do typing. These employees, usually women, used to have to sit in rows working away at their typewriters under the watchful eye of their supervisor. Over the years, designers have come up with several variations on the open theme. In particular, this has been achieved through furnishings. The early designs featured separate desks. A subsequent design introduced the concept of the cubicle. These can have either high screens that workers can't see over, or a screen just low enough to keep a lookout for the manager. And nowadays, with the increase in large call centres, a phenomenon known as hot desking is common. In this system, employees working on different shifts are asked to share the same workstation. As you can imagine, this is not very popular with staff as there is little opportunity to personalise your workspace. In fact, my research shows that employees in general dislike the open plan design. As a part of my research, I conducted a survey of the staff in several large companies with open plan offices. The employees all voiced similar concerns about the design. Firstly, they felt that the open plan took away their privacy, but many also felt the need to carry their valuables with them at all times. So, to some extent, they also felt there was less security with these designs. Another common complaint may be something for employers to consider when choosing this type of design, and this was that these types of office space are bad for the health. I was intrigued by this possibility, but looking at staff records, it does seem to be borne out. So, if this design is so unpopular, why is it so commonplace? Well, the answer to that is in the benefits that the employers feel this type of design has. Of course, there is the obvious benefit that this design significantly reduces costs, both in terms of rent and even in terms of energy use. Employers also argue that an open plan design leads to better teamwork and communication. They also feel that new staff can learn from observing other workers, so this design can actually help in training staff. However, the complaints voiced by employees seem to suggest that the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. The reality is that unhappy workers are unlikely to work well together, and there is plenty of evidence to suggest workers are frequently distracted from their work by the noise that is all around them. What is clear is that as designers, we need to think carefully about the impact that our design has both on the staff involved and the work that they do.
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4.